Hello my lovelies, and thank you so much for joining me today. Very quickly, the letter for you today is and the word is înapoi. 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 Well done guys, you just said back, like going back. Okay, I hope you did a great job in the challenge so far. Let's get straight into today's video, and I'm going to keep on talking about Johnny Depp and Amber Heard trial. And as usual, a disclaimer, all the information I'm giving you in today's video is already found in the public domain. I don't mean any disrespect to anyone I talk about in the video. This is for educational purposes only, and I will also be giving my opinions on this. Yeah, I know, don't worry about my hair, I didn't even brush it today, so yeah, that's that. Anyway, now I have to say guys, I have never seen a trial quite like this one before, and I have watched a fair bit of trials as part of my research for the cases. We are getting bombshell after bombshell every single day of this, and we are still not halfway through it. So it will be, quite honestly, really interesting to see what comes next. I'm sure that each day will be just as surprising as the previous one, and the amount of evidence being brought out every single day is just astonishing. Honestly, I find the whole trial really fascinating. So let's get into the next bombshell of this case. This won't disappoint, just like the previous one didn't. And I know that I might be a bit late covering this, but sorry, I'm trying my best, and there is just a lot of information out there, and I'm also working on a separate case at the same time, which is quite lengthy. So yeah, I might get the things out to you a bit later than I would have liked, but for some reason I can't find enough time or to organize myself properly to be able to bring you more. So again, I'm sorry about that. So we've seen Amber's behavior so far in this trial in the courtroom. We've also heard recordings that she took throughout their entire relationship. We are seeing Amber copying Johnny's outfits in court, including the hairstyle in a sense. We are seeing Amber using glasses in court seemingly out of nowhere. 1 minute she can't see and then the next she can. We are also seeing her gestures and body language in court, and the most obvious is the smile and the lack of in just a matter of seconds, which honestly is quite terrifying. These constant switches from one emotion to another in a matter of seconds is astonishing really. Then we are also seeing Amber frequently flinching to certain situations in court to show that she is scared of the certain situation, like for example, someone is opening the door of the courtroom, she flinches. Different noises, she flinches, and so on. Then we are also seeing Amber trying very hard to cry in that courtroom. These are some unnatural facial expressions. You can see that she is trying too hard to relay a certain emotion. And for me, it's not only fascinating but also very surprising, considering that she is an actress. As an actor, even though you act, you need to look genuine, right? But she looks nothing like genuine. She looks nothing like that. And I'm no body language expert here. I mean, these are just my observations. A clinical psychologist hired to review Amber Heard and Johnny Depp's relationship told jurors that Amber suffers from 2 personality disorders, and she grossly exaggerated her PTSD after their split in 2016. Johnny Depp's legal team called expert witness Dr. Shannon Curry to the stand on Tuesday. Was it Tuesday? What was yesterday? Wednesday? Oh yeah, Tuesday. Please keep in mind that Dr. Shannon Curry is a specialist. She's not someone who just started in psychology. She's been doing this for 15 years. She has her own company and she's been working on high-profile cases. So this is not exactly her first rodeo, if you will. The clinical and forensic psychologist told the court her conclusion was that Amber Heard had traits consistent with borderline personality disorder, BPD, and histrionic personality disorder, HPD. two conditions found in people with patterns of emotional instability and attention-seeking behavior. Dr. Curry testified that she was initially hired by Johnny Depp's lawyers early last year to review files in the legal battle between the two and identify behavior in their relationship that may be consistent with intimate partner violence, also known as IPV. But her role shifted several months later in October when she was asked to provide a psychological evaluation of Amber Heard. Now, before I move on with this video, I just want to make it as clear as I possibly can that Amber Heard does not represent all people suffering with BPD. Not everyone with BPD is violent, aggressive, and so on. And in fact, a lot of people suffering with BPD take it on social media and they say themselves that they are not represented by her and they are nothing like she is, and they feel quite offended, thinking that people suffering from this condition will be portrayed in the same light Amber is being portrayed in this very public trial. BPD, also known as emotional dysregulation disorder, is a mental disorder that impacts a person's ability to regulate their emotions and behavior, and so it negatively affects his or her relationships with others. Meanwhile, HPD, which is the histrionic personality disorder and falls under the umbrella of dramatic personality disorder, just like BPD, is characterized by a pattern of attention-seeking behavior and egocentrism. And we keep seeing this behavior from Amber Heard, right? From the audio recordings, from all the things that have already been proven that she lied about, and from her demeanor. As part of her evaluation, Dr. Curry also looked for signs of PTSD in Amber. Through this evaluation, she said that Amber grossly exaggerated the post-traumatic stress disorder that she claimed to have suffered from her relationship with Johnny. And you know what? I was constantly glued to the screen when I heard Dr. Curry on the stand, because I was really taken aback by how this process works and by how you can use assessments to essentially find out if someone is really suffering from a certain disorder or if they fake it. Now, with PTSD is well known, and Dr. Curry mentioned that as well, it's very difficult to be diagnosed with it, because a person can make it seem like they suffer with PTSD when they are really lying. And then we also have the public conception of what PTSD is and how it manifests, or maybe better put, how it should manifest. And generally we see so-called symptoms and we learn about them from movies which portray PTSD in a certain light, or we read about the symptoms on Google, for example, and we kind of imagine how it looks like, right? So me and you, we can both say that we have PTSD from a certain trauma in our life, right? Because, for instance, we flinch in a certain situation, we jump when we hear a certain noise, we have what we call flashback from the trauma, we might have nightmares from a certain trauma, we react a certain way to different people, different instances, and so, because we think that something is wrong with us, we go and check the symptoms, and then we start ticking all the boxes and we say, yeah, I have PTSD. But PTSD is much more complex than what we see in movies, on social media, in articles, and so on. And when someone goes into all that in great depth to get to the root of the trauma, let's say, and the questions become more complex and asking for in-depth detail, that's when you can find out if it really is PTSD or just an influence from outside, if you will. And there are certain tests that are done which precisely tell if you really suffer from PTSD or you fake it for a certain gain, for example, being that you are an attention seeker, being that you want to play the victim, be it that you are looking for sympathy, and so on. Amber Heard's PTSD symptoms were grossly exaggerated. She wanted to show that she had PTSD from her relationship with Johnny, and she in fact ticked all of those boxes apart from one when questioned about standard symptoms. but we'll talk about that a bit later on. Going back to the BPD, Amber Heard's BPD was marked by an underlying terror of abandonment, and somebody with this condition tends to make desperate attempts to stop this from happening. Out of fear of abandonment, Amber would go to extreme behaviors to stop that from happening. And we've heard this in audio recordings. Johnny would try to leave an argument, just walk away, and she would keep escalating and escalating to the point where she pulled him back into the argument, which by this point became aggressive. I mean, the argument became aggressive. As a result of these disorders, someone like Amber could appear charming at the start of a friendship or relationship, but could then turn dark very, very easily. And this seems to be just like Johnny described their relationship on the stand. At the beginning, Amber was just perfect. She would take off his boots when he came home from work, she would hand him a drink, she would take care of him. As time went on, however, reality started to set in for Amber, and she realized it wasn't perfect, because in this world no one is perfect. Quote, most of us accept people as a whole, but with a person with BPD, things are in these extremes. That person goes from being idealized to dumpster. They are totally devalued. They are the worst. Then there will be a repair, because the person with this disorder does feel remorse. End of quote. And this is from Dr. Curry. Amber realizes that John is not perfect, right? Because nobody's perfect. And in her mind, he is now the worst person. She hates him, she can't stand him, and you can see this from her demeaning behavior towards him. The belittling, the bullying, the pushing for arguments, the aggression. And then she would say that she's sorry, that she loves him and she wants to work on their relationship. It's very much from one extreme to another. According to Dr. Curry, somebody with BPD is usually very, very interested in looks, and they utilize their looks to get the respect that they are looking for. According to her diagnosis, Amber was a sophisticated and calculated case of BPD, somebody who would tend to hit you where it hurts a bit more and be very, very destructive. And this again, we can see, is very true in the way that Amber would treat Johnny. She knew he would be hurt if she brings his children into this relationship, into the argument, and calling him a bad father, so she used that against him. She was always recording him, instigating him before recording, so that she could get a reaction out of him, manipulating the situation to her advantage, blaming others for her actions, and so many other things. And you know, like Johnny said on the stand, when you are in a relationship and you believe that, you know, that significant other is for you and with you for the long haul of the relationship, then you start to open up, you start to trust them, and then you start to show your weaknesses, you start to describe many aspects of your life to them, and you bring out your vulnerabilities and you show them. And in this situation, Amber would use all of these vulnerabilities of Johnny to her own advantage, and she would use these weaknesses and vulnerabilities to manipulate him and to demean him and really to go against him. Dr. Curry also explained that people with BPD have identity issues and tend to change their interests and values constantly. Quote, they take on the personality of the people they want to be around, the way they dress, interest, the way they talk. End of quote. Amber Heard is speculated to have displayed such behavior for the past week, when social media users pointed out that she seemed to be copying Johnny Depp's courtroom outfits and hairstyles. A lot of people claim that Amber was wearing clothing that looked similar to the ones Johnny previously wore during the trial, in an attempt to play mind games on him. And I touched this a bit earlier on in the video, I think it was at the beginning, and Amber didn't do it to Johnny only, copying him. You remember when I said in my other video that her former personal assistant was SA'd 28 years ago, and Amber used her SA as her own? Also, the allegations against Marilyn Manson by his previous partner, Amber seemed to be copying that as well. This is a pattern over time, and I think that the more details you have of Amber's personal life in general, the more that you will be able to see the pattern over time. Obviously, we don't know all those details, but if you would be someone who is close to Amber and you would interact with her on a daily basis, it's more likely that over time you will definitely see this pattern. According to Dr. Curry, the characteristics of histrionic personality disorder in a person include an overly dramatic presentation and quick shifts between emotions, such as going from very animated to sad. And we are also seeing this and hearing this in recordings, how Amber shifts from one emotion to another in an instant. Those with HPD also have a hypersensitivity to being slighted, and they could melt down in the middle of a restaurant if somebody showed up minutes late. Dr. Curry also said they will make a lot of accusations, reactivity, a lot of escalation. They can react aggressively, physically prevent partners from trying to leave. Often they will be to their partners, sometimes physically restrain them. And I think that we are seeing these traits in Amber from her behavior and from all those recordings and from what Johnny testified to. The underlying drive was to always be the center of attention, and without that a person with HPD would feel empty. And I'm going to play some clips from Dr. Curry's statement. It won't be all of it because it's over 1 hour long, but if you want to watch it all, I can leave the link. I will leave the link for you in the description down below.
Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Curry, before the break, you were talking about some of the factors that you considered in determining that Ms. Heard suffers from personality disorders, and one of them, I think the last one you said before you left, was self-report. What do you mean by that?
So the self-report would be things that Ms. Heard indicated to me specifically. So there were a couple of characteristics that she noted in her self-report that were consistent with these personality disorders. The first was actually my own behavioral observations of her based on her self-report. So one of the hallmark characteristics of histrionic personality disorder is sort of a overly dramatic presentation. We call this impressionistic speech. So it tends to be very flowery. It uses a lot of descriptive words like magical, wonderful, and it can go on for quite some time, and yet it really lacks any substance. So at the end, you're left wondering what was just said or what the answer is to the actual question. So that occurred a number of times, and it also represented the quick shifts you'll see between emotions. So she would suddenly be one way, and then she would become very animated or very sad. And when people are displaying these emotions with this personality disorder, there's a sense of shallowness to it. People who are observing them will feel like it's almost play acting, and they might not be able to put their finger on it, but part of it is because of the rapidness with which the person can switch emotions, and also the lack of substance. They don't really refer to, I feel this way. They might describe emotions, they might describe events, but very rarely, and Ms. Heard did not say, I feel vulnerable. She never really indicated a vulnerable feeling of her own. Then the substance of her self-report. So when I was asking her information about her history.
We're going to ask more about that later. I was just trying to get a sense of what a self-report was.
Oh, okay.
What psychological tests did you perform?
Okay, so psychological tests, I'll just go in order. So first of all, I asked her a couple questions from something called the mini mental status exam. That's really just a fancy way of saying that I wanted to make sure that she was alert and oriented to, we call it person, place, and time. That means she knew who she was, she knew who I was, she knew where we were, and she knew the date. That way I can ensure that she's able to participate in the evaluation and understand what's happening. I then administered something called the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory 2. The 2 means that it's the second edition. And this is something we call an objective measure. So it asks 567 questions, more statements, and the person either agrees or disagrees with them, how much the statement represents them. And this test has been around since 1943. There are more than 10,000 studies showing that it is appropriate for determining somebody's personality traits. It measures all of those things I sort of mentioned, how a person thinks, feels, and behaves in multiple different aspects of their lives. It also measures very accurately any signs of mental illness or dysfunction. And the reason I also really like this test, whenever you're using a test for an evaluation that's going to be used in a forensic setting, people have a lot of incentive to present themselves in a way that's going to benefit their case. And they may want to look like they're sicker than they really are. They may want to look much healthier than they really are. And some of those incentives, they may not even realize that they're intending to do that. So it can be conscious or unconscious, but you really need to have a test that can check for that. And the MMPI-2 has a set of validity scales, we call them. These are scales that measure really the truthfulness and accuracy with which a person is approaching the test. And these scales on this particular test have been so well researched over many decades that they've become very nuanced, and they can tell us a lot about if somebody's, for instance, exaggerating. Are they elevating one of the scales that shows that they're exaggerating on purpose? Are they exaggerating in a manner that's more like a cry for help? Are they exaggerating in a manner that's clever and sophisticated or more obvious? And then the same exact thing goes for trying to minimize symptoms. We have a number of scales that can show us all the different, if somebody's trying to say they're the most wonderful person on earth, or if they're just trying to deny problems, and if they're doing that again in a very clever way or more of an obvious way. So that test was my choice for this case. There's one other reason I'd like to add, is that part of my evaluation was, one of the reasons was to assess whether Ms. Heard has post-traumatic stress disorder, which I told you about earlier, as a result of the incidents that she's alleged occurred by Mr. Depp. And that's a really tough disorder to find out if somebody's faking it or not. It's one of the most easily faked disorders. Most of us know what it feels like to feel anxious, and a lot of people have seen war movies and movies that depict somebody having PTSD. In fact, some research has shown that if you give someone a diagnostic checklist and said, show that you have PTSD, they can do it 96% of the time, just someone on the street. So you really need a test that's very sensitive to that, and the MMPI-2 has been shown in multiple studies to be excellent at detecting those attempts.
Okay, you keep using MMPI-2. That's the abbreviation that you folks use for?
I'm sorry if I hadn't said that. That's the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory.
Okay. What other psychological testing did you perform?
So I also performed the clinician-administered PTSD scale, -5, and that -5 links it to the diagnosis for PTSD in our current diagnostic manual, the 5th version. To do that test, you first administer something called the Life Events Checklist. And the Life Events Checklist, both of these tests, by the way, were developed by the National Center for PTSD with the Department of Veterans Affairs.
As a result of applying those protocols, what did you conclude?
Ms. Heard did not have PTSD, and there were also pretty significant indications that she was grossly exaggerating symptoms of PTSD when asked about them.
How did you make that latter conclusion?
So one of the strengths of this test, as I mentioned, the important thing about any test used when you're doing an evaluation in forensics is to make sure that the person is responding accurately. And this test does that by not just asking people whether they have a symptom, but asking follow-up questions that draw out very detailed accounts of every single symptom of PTSD. And when you're really familiar with this disorder, which you need to be to administer this test, there are nuances in the way a person will describe their symptoms that have been shown repeatedly to indicate exaggeration or faking. There are also indications when somebody is clearly giving you a genuine response.
Okay. What, if any, symptoms of PTSD did you observe in Ms. Heard?
So there are 20 kind of core symptoms that somebody can manifest with PTSD. You don't have to have all of them. Ms. Heard initially said that she had, in the first question, you say, do you ever have this, before you get to the more nuanced follow-up questions. When I asked that first question on each item, she initially said, yes, I have that, to 19 of the 20 symptoms. That's not typical even of somebody with the most disabling form of PTSD. When we eventually sort of dialed it down, she had 3 remaining symptoms. And having symptoms of any disorder is common for all of us. Some of us struggle with sleep. Some of us get anxious. It could be several different disorders. It could just be that you have this struggle in your life. But she had 3 specific symptoms that I scored as present. Off the top of my head, I might miss one, but one was sleep disturbance. So she reported that she has frequent nightmares. Another one was that she said that she tends to have a startle response. So if she gets startled or surprised, she tends to stay in sort of a hyper startle mode for quite a while, and that's consistent with a couple of things. It can be consistent with PTSD if other criteria are met. It's also consistent with childhood complex trauma, which is something that can occur when your brain is forming. If you constantly feel unsafe, if your parents are abusive, or if they're not present, if you're neglected, you can develop certain physiological responses that can stay for a long time in your life. So I noted that seemed like a very genuine, accurate account where she stays in the state of kind of hyper arousal, has a hard time calming down if she gets surprised.
You mentioned nightmares as well.
Yes.
Did she recount for you the nature of the nightmares?
So they were vague. She indicated that she has recurrent nightmares and that she feels as though she's being held down.
Did there come a time when you met directly with Ms. Heard?
Yes, I did. So in conducting my evaluation, I met with Ms. Heard on 2 separate dates, December 10th and December 17th, 2021.
Approximately how much time have you spent with Ms. Heard?
So the evaluation, we spent 12 hours directly with one another. However, there were more hours involved in the evaluation with some breaks. So we spent 7 hours together on the first day.
As a result of the work that you performed, did you form any opinions with respect to Ms. Heard?
I did.
What were those opinions?
The results of Ms. Heard's evaluation supported 2 diagnoses: borderline personality disorder and histrionic personality disorder.
While making her assessment, Dr. Shannon Curry explained she reviewed various materials in the case, including Amber's medical records, mental health treatment records, court exhibits, witness statements, as well as audio and video recordings. She also reviewed Amber's therapist notes, the therapist that she had before Johnny, and I believe it was also a therapist that she had during her relationship with Johnny. Now, one of the differences between therapists and forensic psychologists is that therapists, for example, they have to believe their client because that's how they are being trained. They believe what their client says, and accordingly they offer therapy and or any treatment. Whereas forensic psychologists look at this differently. They give diagnostics. They look at previous relationship. They look at any trauma throughout their patient's life, something going as far back as since the time they were born. They look at their professional relationships, evidence in the case. They are not conditioned in a sense to believe or disbelieve the person that they are assessing. They are doing the evaluation based on a very complicated process which I can't really explain. Shannon also met with Amber for several hours over the course of 2 separate dates in December 2021 before finally coming to a diagnosis. She spent around 12 hours with Amber for this evaluation. According to Amber's medical notes, the court heard 2 instances in which her condition was illustrated.
You didn't diagnose, you didn't actually have a DSM-5 diagnosis that Amber Heard suffers from either borderline personality disorder or histrionic personality disorder, correct?
That's not correct.
In fact, your report says Ms. Heard demonstrates psychological symptoms of a combined borderline and histrionic personality disorder. Would you agree?
Yes, I did say that in also what designation was that? I believe January 18th that report was included? Yes.
Okay. And that's what you said at that time, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
I said a little bit more than that as well.
You said, and I'll read it, I'll quote it, quote, based on the combined results of my interview with Ms. Heard, behavioral observations, psychometric test data, and review of the available records, Ms. Heard demonstrates psychological symptoms of a combined borderline and histrionic personality disorder, BHPD. That's
Yes.
what you wrote in your report as one of your conclusions, correct?
And that's a DSM-5 diagnosis.
And it did not say that you were diagnosing with a DSM-5 for borderline personality disorder or histrionic personality disorder, did it?
That's what it says in different semantics.
Oh, so what you meant to say.
It did not use the words you just said.
Now, let's talk about the treatment records that you said that you reviewed. But I'm going to start with Rocky Pennington. Your testimony was that out of the blue, Amber hit Rocky Pennington, correct?
I can't remember exactly what I said, but I did reference Ms. Pennington's deposition that Ms. Heard struck Ms. Pennington in the face.
In
Yes.
fact, Ms. Pennington testified that she hit Ms. Heard. And in response to that, she can't recall, but Ms. Heard either pushed or slapped her, correct?
I don't recall.
That's a pretty important distinction, don't you think?
My recollection is that there was some sort of violence both ways in the relationship. Either way, it seems that both of them might have been unstable. I'm only evaluating Ms. Heard.
So now we have an evaluation of Rocky Pennington
No,
from...
I just said, but that was not relevant to my opinion because I'm only evaluating Ms. Heard.
But you testified to that on direct that that was a factor, right?
Yes.
Okay. Well, wouldn't it make a big difference if Amber struck first or just responded back?
Given the dynamic, not necessarily. No, it would not have.
So now you're an expert on Rocky Pennington and her dynamics with Amber Heard. I'll withdraw. Okay, so now let's talk about Dr. Cowan. You not only reviewed his treatment records and his text messages and documents, but you also attended his deposition, did you not?
Yes.
Okay. And do you recall Dr. Cowan testifying that Amber told him about Depp physically abusing her contemporaneous with the events?
I don't recall specifically his words, but I remember him recalling that she had disclosed abuse in their treatment, yes.
And do you recall Dr. Cowan testifying that he received a text message contemporaneous that Johnny did a number on me tonight. I'm safe in my support tonight, but I need some real help. Do you remember him testifying to that?
I don't remember the testimony, but I do remember seeing that text message as one of the exhibits.
And do you remember Dr. Cowan testifying that on another occasion, Amber sent him a text, Johnny beat me up pretty good last night, end of quote.
Again,
Not in this instance. She can rely on it. She testified.
Overruled.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Honor. I didn't need to argue that hard, I guess. Do you recall that?
Again, I don't recall the testimony, but I do remember that being an exhibit. I've seen it.
Do you recall Dr. Cowan testifying that not only did he believe Amber in her reporting of the abuse by Depp, but that she had no ulterior motive?
I actually don't recall that. I'm not saying that it didn't occur.
Okay. Do you recall Dr. Cowan testifying that he believed the relationship was toxic and he was concerned for Amber's physical well-being?
I do recall him saying that he believed the relationship was toxic.
And you don't recall
I do
Dr.
not.
Cowan saying that he was concerned for Amber's physical well-being?
I don't remember those exact words.
Do you recall Dr. Cowan testifying in that deposition that you were present for, referring to Mr. Depp, quote, his controlling nature, jealousy and suspiciousness, addiction to drugs and alcohol, and violent and indulgent temper? Do you recall him using those terms to describe Mr. Depp?
I remember thinking that would be an inappropriate impression for a treating provider of a different person to give, but I do recall him making that statement.
Do you recall Dr. Cowan testifying that if he pushed her, she was going to push him back? And I never had the impression that she was the provocateur, but that she was indicating to me she had a hard time, de-escalating these types of situations.
Yes.
Okay. And do you also recall him saying that she didn't say she pushed him, she just said, I got right back up? She told me that he pushed her down and she got right back up.
I remember him saying that Ms. Heard told him that, yes.
And do you recall him testifying, you could interpret it that way? I kind of interpret it more, metaphorically, that when somebody comes at her, she goes back at them, in a similar way, whether it's verbally or she protects herself. Do you recall that?
I recall something along those lines, but it was a 6 or 7 hour deposition, so the specifics are not fresh in my mind.
Do you recall Dr. Cowan specifically testifying that he believed Amber Heard when she reported the physical abuse by Mr. Depp?
I recall him saying that and following it up with a statement that you have to take the patient at their word when you're the therapist.
You recall that?
Yes.
Do you recall him saying that he believed her? That he found her believable?
Yes, that he found her believable.
Okay. Now, you also testified about Amy Banks. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And before we go there, Dr. Cowan has been a clinical psychologist for 40 years, correct?
I'm not sure.
Okay. Well, he testified to that, didn't he, in the deposition?
I don't recall.
And he also saw Amber Heard for over 2 years, correct?
Yes.
From 2014, approximately August 2014 to 2016, correct?
Yes, he did.
For a period of time, would you agree? Okay. And he also testified that he did not diagnose Amber with borderline personality disorder. Do you recall that testimony?
He also testified that he doesn't use diagnoses, but yes, I do recall that.
And do you recall that it was those words were in his notes, but he said he had written that down, but then he discounted it and determined that that was not correct for her?
Oh, you want to approach?
DocuSign, the way the world agrees.
All right, now let's jump to Amy Banks. Dr. Banks is a psychiatrist, correct?
Yes.
And in fact, she went to medical school at Georgetown, and she did her psychiatric training at Harvard Medical School, correct?
I believe that's correct. I don't recall 100%.
All right, and she was a psychiatrist in Massachusetts that Amber Heard had reached out to
Yes.
after the Australia incident to try to help her relationship with Mr. Depp, correct? Let me back up. You attended Dr. Banks' deposition as well, did you not?
Yes, I did.
And Dr. Banks testified to that, correct?
I don't remember if she testified to that. I don't have the notes right in front of me or the deposition transcript.
All right. Do you recall Dr. Banks testifying that she understood that Amber was in a relationship with Johnny Depp that had gotten violent and out of control?
I don't recall specifically, no.
Do you recall Amy Banks testifying that they had physical altercations and his drug use had escalated and Amber felt she was at risk?
I don't recall.
Do you recall Amy Banks testifying that Amber was reporting the violence by Mr. Depp and it was not consensual?
I recall Dr. Banks stating that Ms. Heard was reporting violence to her, yes. I do not recall a statement about consent.
Do you recall Dr. Banks testifying that there was discussion about Mr. Depp cutting off his finger, and she said only that it was the middle of one of these very kind of out-of-control escalated fights, and that did make a fairly big impact on me?
I remember something like that.
All right. And do you recall Dr. Banks saying it was a whole other level? As I remember, it told to me he actually cut off a part of his finger during one of these altercations, meaning, to me, the way I digested that, if you will, was that things had gotten particularly out of control.
I do not recall that exact statement. I'm not saying it didn't occur, I just can't recall it.
All right. And you recall that Mr. Depp was in sessions with Ms. Heard with Dr. Banks, correct?
Yes. My understanding, however, is that they met with Dr. Banks, and then it was primarily Ms. Heard meeting with Dr. Banks for treatment after prescriptions and therapy.
All right. And do you recall Dr. Banks saying that she was not surprised that Amber was seeking a restraining order because of the violence that she knew existed in the relationship?
I do recall that, and it would be impossible to know that violence exists as a treating therapist or as a psychologist. Again, we're not investigators. However, I do recall that she said that because I remember having that thought.
And do you recall Amy, and she's a psychiatrist, right?
Psychiatrist.
Okay. And do you recall Amy Banks saying that it was clear to her that Mr. Depp was the one who initiated the violence?
I don't recall that.
All right. Do you recall that Dr. Banks said that she knew for certain that Mr. Depp was the one who had committed the violence because Ms. Heard reported it in the presence of Mr. Depp and he did not contradict?
I do not recall that.
Okay. And do you recall that Dr. Banks ultimately concluded that it was her belief that Amber was a victim of domestic violence at the hands of Mr. Depp?
There, you want to approach this?
And what was your answer to that last one? I'm sorry.
I think I can't recall, but I also can't recall that last question.
Do you recall that Dr. Banks concluded that Amber was a victim of domestic violence at the hands of Mr. Depp?
I don't recall that.
Okay. Now, you also reviewed the records of Laurel Anderson and you reviewed her deposition, is that correct?
Let me refresh my memory for a moment. I reviewed Dr. Anderson's deposition, yes.
Okay, and do you recall that she reported that Amber Heard had reported physical violence by Mr. Depp to her?
I recall that she said that Ms. Heard had reported that, yes.
Okay, and do you recall that she said that it changed over time?
I don't recall that specifically.
Okay, and do you recall Dr. Anderson saying that she had witnessed her face being bruised after the December 15, 2015 incident?
I don't recall that.
You don't recall that, okay. And do you recall that Dr. Anderson said that Amber had reported that he had pulled out her hair, bruised her face, kicked her leg, and hit her in the head?
Yes, Ms. Heard did report that to her according to her testimony.
Okay. And do you recall that Amber Heard said that Mr. Depp was scaring her?
I don't recall that specifically.
Okay. And do you recall that Dr. Anderson said she believed that Amber Heard was a victim of domestic abuse at the hands of Mr. Depp?
I recall, no, I don't recall that statement.
All right, let's go to Bonnie Jacobs. You said that you reviewed the notes from Bonnie Jacobs, correct?
Yes.
And what you testified to was that you discounted these because the first notes from Bonnie Jacobs indicated that she already had all of these symptoms, correct?
I'm sorry, I don't understand what you're saying. I discounted.
Tell me why you discounted Bonnie Jacobs' notes.
I did not discount Bonnie Jacobs' notes.
You said that Bonnie Jacobs, in her notes, had already determined that these symptoms were present for Amber Heard before the relationship with Mr. Depp, did you not?
What I recall saying was that within Dr. Jacobs's notes, she's documented instances in which Ms. Heard reported to her over the course of therapy that she was experiencing nightmares, recurrent nightmares, in fact, about childhood abuse.
Okay. Now, the very first entry on Bonnie Jacobs' notes, and these are the notes, right? Do you recognize these?
I do, and we
Okay.
received more sort of at the tail end just a couple months ago.
All right, so the first of Bonnie Jacobs' notes is on 10/17/2011. Do you recall that?
I don't recall the exact date. I don't have anything in front of me.
And Amber Heard was already in the relationship with Johnny Depp at this point, was she not?
I believe she was, yes.
Okay. And in Bonnie Jacobs' notes, she documents
However, go ahead.
multiple occasions that Amber Heard reports to her physical violence upon her by Mr. Depp, does she not?
There are several notes that indicate that Ms. Heard has reported violence by Mr. Depp, yes.
Many, correct?
I wouldn't qualify it as many. I'm not sure what you mean by many.
How many would you say?
I don't know. I don't have the notes in front of me.
Okay, well, what do you recall in deciding to make your opinions in this case?
Well, I'm confused about the dates because I know that Dr. Jacobs treated Ms. Heard even while she was in her prior relationship, leaving her prior relationship with her last wife.
Dr. Curry, I'm not going to ask you to try to bring in extraneous things. I'm asking you what you recall of these
But
notes.
the dates would have been different based on that alone.
Okay.
And I recall that there was quite a bit of information because these were copious notes spanning back in time from her relationship with Tasha.
So, Dr. Curry, please answer my question. How many occasions do you recall
I don't know.
Dr. Jacobs documenting Amber reporting physical abuse?
I don't know.
Who are you?
You don't know me?
Now, you also said that you listened to audio tapes in this case, correct?
Yes.
Did you hear Mr. Depp admitting to headbutting Ms. Heard?
That is not what I heard.
You didn't hear that?
I heard a conversation about headbutting. I did not hear him, as you said, admit to headbutting Ms. Heard.
Okay, that's your characterization of it, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Did you see the videotape of Mr. Depp in the kitchen?
Yes.
Okay, did Ms. Heard imagine that or create that, or was she responsible for that somehow?
I'll sustain the objection. Next question.
Okay. What, if any, impact did that have on your opinions watching Mr. Depp in that video?
I'm not sure it was one of many pieces of the exhibits and other collateral data that I considered. I'm not sure what the direct impact was or if that could be measured.
All right. Now, counsel asked you whether you had conducted any type of examination on Mr. Depp, and I believe your answer was no, correct?
No.
You did not review any medical records or psychological records from Mr. Depp either, did you?
I reviewed all of the records that were available.
Do you recall reviewing medical and psychological records on Mr. Depp?
Yes.
Do you recall Dr. Blaustein referring to Mr. Depp having rage?
No, I actually recall him referring to Ms. Heard in that note.
Your testimony is that Dr. Blaustein was referring to Amber Heard as having rage?
I transcribed several of the notes, and I may be missing a time when I said that about Mr. Depp. The handwriting was very difficult to transcribe, but there was one instance in which I recall transcribing him stating that Mr. Depp reported that Ms. Heard had rage.
Dr. Blaustein's deposition was taken, was it not?
I don't recall.
Do you recall, so I take it then you don't recall him testifying that Mr. Depp told him he had rage and demons?
I don't recall.
Do you recall Dr. Blaustein testifying that Mr. Depp looked at his wife Amber like his mother or his sister that he didn't like?
I haven't seen his deposition. I don't recall that.
Okay. Now, did you see and do you know whether Mr. Depp has ever been diagnosed with any personality disorders?
That's not relevant to my task to conduct an evaluation of Ms. Heard. So I do not know that he has had one. It was not in the records that he did.
All right. So one way or the other, you don't know whether Mr. Depp suffers from any personality disorders.
First, she admitted she cut her arm in the past, which was a typical thing that somebody with BPD does, according to Dr. Curry. Amber's former friend, Rocky Pennington, told how they were once out shopping for Thanksgiving items and Amber struck her face out of the blue. Dr. Curry said that this could happen if Amber decided that Rocky wasn't meeting her needs and then she just lashed out. Dr. Curry was also asked if Amber had PTSD because of her relationship with Johnny, and she said no. In fact, Amber was grossly exaggerating the symptoms of PTSD, and she claimed to have 19 out of a list of 20 conditions. According to one test, Amber was in the 98th percentile for exaggerating her PTSD, which indicated she engaged in extreme levels of exaggeration. But even then, there was evidence that these issues were there even before Amber and Johnny got together. Amber said that when she first moved to LA, she suffered from blanket anxiety and depression. Summing up her interactions with Amber, Dr. Curry said that she was very likable, but her testing showed she approached it in a manner that very clearly minimized any psychological dysfunction, but presented herself as free of problems and did so in a way that was not obvious. Under cross-examination, Dr. Curry admitted that she believed Johnny was a good actor and that she enjoyed a 4-hour dinner with him and his lawyers before being hired. I will tell you one thing though. I know that, cross-examinations, they are trying to discredit the witness, but this cross-examination was not only brutal, but it was disrespectful and condescending in my opinion. Amber's lawyer, Elaine, questioned Shannon's decision to sit down for a 3 to 4 hour dinner with Johnny Depp and his legal team at his home before taking the case. Elaine had a particular issue, and really she wanted to point out that Shannon was biased because she had dinner at Johnny's house. There was also an issue with Shannon's husband buying muffins for Shannon. Yes, precisely. There was an issue with Shannon's husband buying muffins for Shannon, which Shannon shared with Amber. Then Amber was lying about what Shannon told her. All these silly things that were supposed to portray Shannon in a biased way, that she was paid by Johnny Depp. Therefore, she had to come up with a negative assessment towards Amber Heard, that she was a fan of Johnny, that she bragged about her high-profile client, and so on. So you can better understand what I mean. Let's just watch this.
Dr. Curry, you're not board certified, correct?
No, I'm not.
Not in clinical psychology or in forensic psychology, correct?
No, I'm a licensed clinical psychologist.
But you're not board certified?
No.
Okay. And you also have only been practicing approximately 8 years, is that correct?
That's not correct.
How many years?
I've been licensed for 10 years,
Okay.
and I've been practicing for about 15 years.
Okay. And that includes what you went through with your different trials in Hawaii and everything else that you testified to, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you went to Mr. Depp's home for dinner and drinks before you were hired as an expert in this case, correct?
That's not quite right. I was interviewed at Mr. Depp's home by his legal team. Dinner was served.
You, in attendance with Mr. Depp was Adam Waldman, correct?
Yes.
Ben Chu, correct?
Yes.
Camille Vasquez?
Yes.
Okay. And the dinner lasted approximately 3 to 4 hours, correct?
Yes.
And it included
The interview.
drinks, correct?
Yes. dinner and I believe drinks were served.
Okay. And this was before you were hired as an expert, correct?
Yes, this was an interview so that they could make an informed decision as to whether or not to retain me.
And don't you think that's a little odd that you're getting interviewed by Mr. Depp to decide whether you're going to testify adversely against Amber Heard?
I was interviewed by the legal team.
Okay. And Mr. Depp was present. It was his home, correct?
Yes.
And he was serving dinner and drinks.
He was
correct?
not serving dinner and drinks.
Well, it was at his house, at his behest, correct?
Yes, it was at his house.
Okay. And you were contacted by Camille Vasquez, somebody you knew in the community, in February of 2020. Is that correct?
I knew of Ms. Vasquez professionally. We live in the same city, and I work with many attorneys.
Okay. And at that time, you not only knew Johnny Depp, you'd seen a number of his TV and movie roles, and you believed he was a good actor, correct?
Not correct. I did not know Johnny Depp. I
Well,
had
you knew
seen
of
several
him.
of his movies.
You knew who he was.
Yes.
Right. And you believed he was a good actor,
Yes.
correct? Okay. And then you provided an expert designation in this case before ever seeing Amber or having an opportunity to review any documents or records. Isn't that correct?
I did not provide an expert designation. That's an attorney thing. My opinions are contained in my report.
Let's pull up Plaintiff's Exhibit 884, please. This was plaintiff's designation, identification of expert witnesses in this case. And this is dated February 2021. That's a year after you went to dinner at Mr. Depp's house, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And it attributes, if you go to page 13, it says you have 3 opinions. The first of those is that Amber Heard, quote, exhibits patterns of behavior that are consistent with co-occurring cluster B personality disorder traits, especially borderline personality disorder. Did I get that right?
I'm reading that here. That is not my opinion.
Okay.
Well,
but
it's a current
attributed-
opinion, but this was not an opinion of mine then. I didn't have any opinions at that time.
It says Dr. Curry will testify, correct?
That's what it says, yes.
Okay. And this is a signed pleading, correct? On behalf of Mr. Depp.
I'm not sure I understand what that means.
You don't understand what a signed pleading is?
No.
Okay. Do you understand that Mr. Depp's counsel prepared this and served it on Ms. Heard's counsel?
I'm not an attorney. I don't understand necessarily all of these procedures.
Okay. Are you aware that Mr. Depp is on an audio recording years earlier taunting Amber Heard that she has a borderline personality disorder?
I was made aware of that in this case, yes.
So you heard, is that one of the audios?
Not
you
necessarily
listened to?
taunting, but I do recall hearing that Mr. Depp had used that phrase.
So it's a coincidence that you now think she has those attributes after the attorneys listed it in February 2021 before you'd looked at anything, and Mr. Depp had made that accusation to Ms. Heard years earlier.
My opinions aren't based on coincidence.
It's objection. I'm
Okay.
sorry, Dr. Yes. Compound, I'll sustain the objection.
All right. It's a coincidence then that you came up with symptoms of borderline personality disorder years later after Mr. Depp has been taunting Ms. Heard in an audio tape.
I can't speak to whether or not there's a coincidence. What I can tell you is my opinions are based on the results of my evaluation.
And it's a coincidence that Mr. Depp's counsel attributed that to you, that said that to you in February 2021 before you'd looked at anything, correct?
I'm not sure.
Okay. Now, would you agree that a disproportionate number of women are tagged with a diagnosis of borderline personality disorder?
No, that's not quite right.
75%?
The way you phrased it is not quite right.
Tell me what's right.
Okay, so there are more women who have been diagnosed with bipolar disorder than men. It's more prevalent in women.
And trauma can cause borderline personality disorders, can't it?
No.
Never?
Right now, we know that there are people who have borderline personality disorder who have sustained childhood trauma. There are also people who have borderline personality disorder who have had no childhood trauma. So like most personality disorders, and really like most mental health issues in general, there seems to be both a biological component. In this case with borderline personality disorder, the research tends to support a genetic component and possibly a neurological component. And then there is also possibly an environmental component triggering those genetic markers.
Do you know the percentage of women who are victims of IPV, intimate partner violence, or domestic, who are diagnosed with borderline personality disorders?
I can't tell you the percentage off of the top of my head, but I do know that there is a larger, women with borderline personality disorder tend to have a higher prevalence of being involved in intimate partner violence relationships, being the receiver of violence, and being the perpetuators of violence.
Now, you've never been asked to testify or serve as an expert with respect to whether someone has a bipolar disorder. Is that correct?
A bipolar disorder?
Yes.
That's not correct.
Okay. Do you recall having your deposition taken in this case?
Yes,
On March 21, 2022?
I believe that was the date, yes.
And were you under oath at that time?
Yes.
All right, I'm going to ask you to turn to page 207. And the question was, have you ever been asked to testify or serve as an expert with respect to whether someone has bipolar disorder? And your answer at that time, will you please read to the jury?
I'm sorry, page 207?
207, line 5. Could you
No.
read? Okay, thank you. Now, when this designation was served in February of 2021, you had not rendered an opinion that, quote, Ms. Heard exhibits patterns of behavior that are consistent with co-occurring cluster B personality disorder traits, especially borderline personality disorder, correct?
I'm sorry, I missed the first part. What was that?
When this designation was served that you have in front of you as Plaintiff's Exhibit 884,
Oh, okay.
you had not rendered an opinion that, quote, Ms. Heard exhibits patterns of behavior that are consistent with co-occurring cluster B personality disorder traits, especially borderline personality disorder, correct?
No, I had not rendered any opinions. My opinions weren't finalized until after my evaluation.
Right. So when this came out, you had not rendered that opinion?
I had not rendered that opinion.
Okay. You have never been asked to testify as to whether anyone has behavioral or characterological conduct that suggests they may have been an IPV perpetrator, correct?
No, I've never been asked to testify for that.
Okay. And that was not your opinion in February 2021, correct?
No.
And in fact, you do not hold that opinion now, and you were not even asked to provide such an analysis or opinion. Isn't that correct?
No. Or that is correct,
That's
yes.
correct. Okay. And you have never held that opinion, correct?
No, that is correct, yes.
Okay. And your third opinion, if we can go to page 14, was that Ms. Heard exhibits patterns of behavior that suggest her allegations of abuse against Mr. Depp are false, end of quote. Do you see that?
I see that. You said it's my third opinion. That is not my opinion.
All right. But in this pleading, it says that you will testify to that, correct?
Yes, that's what this says.
Okay. And that was not your opinion in February 2021, was it?
No, as I said, I had not formed any opinions at that time. I had just been retained.
And in fact, you have never arrived at this opinion as an expert witness in this case, correct?
In terms, no, the opinions that I've rendered are provided in my report.
And
they're what I'm testifying to today.
And you have never arrived at this opinion as an expert witness in this case, correct?
I'll sustain it.
You have never arrived at the opinion that Ms. Heard exhibits patterns of behavior that suggest her allegations of abuse against Mr. Depp are false, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And in fact, you've said that has never been my opinion, correct?
What I'm saying is that the opinions in here, these are not my opinions. My opinions are provided in my report.
Can you please turn to page 255? And the question is now, the next one is, quote, Ms. Heard exhibits patterns of behavior that suggest her allegations of abuse against Mr. Depp are false, end of quote. Was that your opinion in February 2021? And you answered at that time, no, correct?
That is correct.
And then I asked, have you ever arrived at that opinion in the time that you have served as an expert witness in this case? And your answer was, could you read that to the jury, please?
Yes. So no, it's not the task. I was cut off, or essentially what I said then was, no,
Dr.
that's
Curry,
not the task of dash. That was never my task to determine. Can I say what that means?
No. And then the question is, so is it fair to say that you have never arrived at an opinion that, quote, Ms. Heard exhibits patterns of behavior that suggest allegations of abuse against Mr. Depp are false, end of quote. And what was your answer?
Well, there was an objection.
All right, I'll read it for you if you're having difficulty.
Okay, no,
Your answer was under oath, correct. That is not my opinion. That has never been my opinion. Isn't that what
Correct.
you said under
Yes.
oath on March 21st? Okay. And then I wrote, then I'm going to ask you, do you know who wrote this portion of the designation suggesting that these were your opinions in February of 2021? And what was your answer?
I said no.
At the time of this initial expert designation, you had not reviewed any materials, reached any opinions, correct?
I believe I had just started to review materials. I believe that I indicated that in my deposition. I had not yet rendered any opinions. I hadn't completed my review, and I hadn't conducted an evaluation.
Okay. And in fact, you've never testified as an expert on IPV, intimate partner violence. Isn't that correct?
I believe that is correct, but I may not be remembering all of my cases.
Oh, let's go to page 200.
Okay.
Line 17. My question was, have you ever testified as an expert on IPV? And your answer under oath then at line 22 was what?
Oh, gosh, let me catch up. Line 22. No.
And you've never testified as an expert on emotional distress damages associated with IPV, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And you've never been asked to testify with respect to emotional damages associated with domestic violence or abuse, isn't that correct?
Again, I'm reluctant to say that's correct because with 15 years of experience, a lot of my cases have been complex, and that may have been a component, but I don't remember explicitly a case being just about that.
Let's go
Correct.
to page 199, line 20. My question to you was, have you ever been asked to testify with respect to emotional damages associated with domestic violence or abuse? And your answer under oath at that time was?
No.
I've not, right?
Sorry, I
isn't that
haven't
what
found
you
the
said?
page in time.
Okay. You said, no, I've not.
But I have
correct?
not.
Okay. Now, you also have never been asked to testify on whether an individual is being truthful in saying that they are a survivor of IPV. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And you have never qualified as an expert to speak to whether a person suffered from IPV, intimate partner violence, or was a victim or survivor of IPV. Is that correct?
That's outside the task of a psychologist to determine whether an event occurred. We assess behavior, we assess mental status, we don't detect crimes.
So you have not been asked to testify to that, correct?
It's not something that occurs, so no, I have not.
And you were not ultimately asked to provide any opinions on that, correct?
No, I was not.
Okay. You were, in fact, so excited about being involved in this case that you told your husband, even though this was a highly confidential matter, that you were going to be conducting the examination of Ms. Heard, didn't you?
That is not accurate.
You not only told your husband, but you told Ms. Heard that you told your husband, correct?
Ms. Bredehoff, that is not accurate.
What is accurate?
You're incorrect. That is not correct.
Is your testimony today under oath that you did not tell your husband that you were going to be conducting the examination of Amber?
That is my testimony.
Okay. go to page 306. So the question that was asked was because you brought muffins, you said, from your husband, right? You gave those to Ms. Heard, correct?
May I clarify what occurred so that we can stop talking about the muffins? What happened was that I was getting ready that morning. I frequently bring muffins to the office. My husband did happen to know that there was going to be a celebrity client coming in because on the mornings that occurs, which often occurs, we have to actually clear the office and move the staff to the other office. So yes, on the one hand, he was aware of that. I was getting ready. I asked him to go to the bakery near our house and pick up the muffins for me because I was running late. He often has to do that because I often do run late. He brought the muffins back to the house. I brought them into the office. Ms. Heard and I enjoyed the muffins together. I think I made a comment to her along the lines like, we can thank my husband, my husband got these for us today, meaning he purchased the muffins. We are now enjoying them because of him.
Did you say on pages 305 and 306 that you frequently have examinations of high-profile clients? You want to just take a quick look and tell us?
What, 305, 306?
Yeah, that's where we're talking about it.
Is there a line you'd like me to look at?
You can start with 15, line 15, 305. Just read through that and tell me whether you said anywhere in there that you have a lot of high-profile examinations. You do this frequently.
Objection to improper impeachment.
I don't agree.
Won't you approach, please?
He knew you had a high-profile client, and you were preparing for a very long time, and you asked him to pick up the muffins, correct?
I asked him to pick up the muffins for me, yes.
Okay.
We have also heard from Alejandro Romero in court, who was the doorman of the Eastern Columbia building Johnny and Amber lived at. Johnny Depp was really laughing when Alejandro described how Amber asked him to investigate an intruder because of scratches on their front door, which were 4 inches above the floor, which were actually caused by the dog. Yeah. He also said that Amber and her friend Rocky told him somebody was trying to get into their unit at the Eastern Columbia building in West Hollywood because of those same scratches 4 inches above the floor. Alejandro said, and I quote, "They were so scared they asked me to go inside the unit to check room by room. I did it. It's part of my job." Alejandro Romero met Amber Heard on May 25, 2016, 4 days after the final argument between her and Johnny before the divorce. Amber claimed that Johnny hit her with a mobile phone at the apartment, which of course he denies. Alejandro said that he didn't see any bruises and cuts on her face at the time and she was 3 feet away from him. Earlier in the day, a Los Angeles police officer who attended the final argument between Johnny and Amber before their divorce said that she could have had a red face after crying because her dog died. Tyler Haddon said that because Amber was uncooperative, he had no idea why she was upset, having called 911 at her West Hollywood penthouse. Amber claimed that Johnny smacked her with a mobile phone during the argument but refused to speak when officers arrived. Officer Haddon told the couple that he categorized the incident as a verbal dispute only. He told the jury he saw no evidence of injuries on Amber and that her red face was consistent with crying. He said that, quote, "Just because I see a female with pink cheeks and pink eyes doesn't mean something happened," end of quote. Officer Haddon said the red face could be because the person started crying because their dog died. The question of Amber's injuries that night are crucial for the case, as a week later she filed for divorce and obtained a restraining order against Johnny Depp accusing him of DV. She arrived at that court hearing with a large bruise on her right cheek, a picture of which was entered into the court file. LAPD officer William Gatlin told the court that he and a colleague went to see Amber again at 10:24 that night. It seemed that a friend of Amber's had called the New York Police Department about the incident and they wanted to return to check on her themselves. The court was shown footage from Officer Gatlin's body camera, which showed them entering the building and walking down the corridor to the penthouse.
Coffee's hot. Burning up. Word around penthouse 3.
Penthouse.
Be advised, we're stepping out onto the penthouse floor. Hello. Officers. How you doing? Doing all right. You guys had somebody come out here earlier already?
Yes, we did.
Okay.
I can't remember their names offhand. We have the card inside.
Cyan, maybe? Yeah, we got another call. I don't know if it's related to the same call from earlier or if somebody called again.
Probably.
We just need to check.
One of you guys know someone in New York or something?
Yeah, she probably called twice.
Okay.
Yeah.
You just talk to your wife just to make sure.
Oh, it's not my wife.
Okay. Whoever it
Different
is.
conversation.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, whoever it is, step out. We just gotta check on them, make sure they're all good.
I'll go get the business card from the cops.
Yeah, I don't know. Just because we got another call and we came again, we still gotta make sure.
Give me 1 second.
Business.
Back up, please. Back up.
Can we just, we'll just come in and just check. We need to make sure everybody in here is okay and then we.
I have called twice. Yeah.
I don't know if she called twice or whoever called, but we just got another notification. So we just need to come in and make sure that everybody's okay.
Yeah.
They're all good. Nobody else is in here.
No. The other officers came by and checked the apartment and the other apartment as well.
Yeah.
It must have been like a double call.
Okay. Who's Amber? Okay. And Johnny
Is definitely not here.
is not here? Okay.
Left probably like 2 hours ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Everything's all good then?
No, it's yet.
All right.
Thank you.
So if you guys need anything else, just call us back.
Okay, thank you very much.
You have a good night.
Thank you, officers.
Yep, thank you. Good night.
Officer Gatlin said that when they went inside, it didn't really seem like anybody was particularly eager to talk to them. Due to the dim lighting, the officer said he couldn't see if Amber had any bruises on her face or not. He also said that based on LAPD's investigation, it appeared Amber was not a victim of DV. Officer Melissa Sainz also appeared via a pre-taped video deposition. She was asked about the visit to the penthouse apartment. Under questioning from Amber Heard's lawyer Elaine, the officer said, quote, "I did not identify her as a victim of DV," adding that she did not see any evidence of a crime, including broken glass or mess in the penthouse. In request for the restraining order that Amber got when the divorce was going on, Amber Heard claimed that Johnny hit her with a cell phone during that encounter, leaving her with a bruise on the right side of her face. In the court file, Amber Heard included an image of the bruise. Elaine showed the photo of Amber's face to the police officer Melissa and asked, "Do you perceive there to be an injury or evidence of injury on Amber's face in this photo?" The officer responded, "No, I do not." I don't know what Elaine was trying to accomplish here, if I'm honest with you, but it kind of all goes against her client. This keeps on happening. Elaine is then asking, what is your perception of the redness on the cheek and the eyelid and above the eyebrow? The officer responded, it's consistent with her crying. She's fair skinned, her face is flushed. This is not going anywhere good, is it? Elaine then asked, you don't think it's consistent with a cell phone being thrown at her? To which I think that at this point, I'm not sure if they did, but I think at this point Johnny Depp's lawyers should have objected to speculation or something similar. I don't know, did they object? I can't remember. To which Melissa responded, correct, it does not look like an injury caused from a cell phone. It's consistent with someone crying. Like I said in my previous video on this case, Amber Heard's lawyers are trying all sorts of things to portray John in a bad light, but it's not really working though, is it? I don't see it working, because so far everything and everyone that they questioned just highlighted the fact that Johnny Depp is a victim of DV and that Amber is manipulative, lying, exaggerating. Basically, she's just not credible. I really don't think, and I think a lot of people agree with me, that they have a case anymore. I don't think they have a case anymore, and I think that by this point they already know it. Like I said, grasping at straws here. None of their tactics seem to be working, because every time it just goes right back against their client. Now you also have Elon Musk, who is not siding with Amber anymore. You also have James Franco, who is not siding with Amber anymore. There is also a petition to remove Amber from Aquaman 2, which gained 2 million signatures. So the public is all against her now, in my opinion. And honestly, I'm not one to entertain, you know, the culture of canceling someone, but I really hope that Amber is not going to stay for Aquaman. It's time that she faces the consequences. I really want her to be criminally charged for all that she's done. I want to see some charges here. I don't see Johnny pressing charges against her. I might be wrong, but I don't really see him as doing this kind of things. But I do honestly hope that the police can press charges against her without Johnny. I think that she honestly truly deserves it. Johnny really predicted her personality disorder, and he also predicted that she will be publicly humiliated, so, you know, I'm kind of seeing it happening. As for the legal implications surrounding this BPD and the HPD, the diagnoses that were given to Amber, I'm not sure legally where we stand with this, because obviously I'm not a legal expert or a lawyer or anybody who, you know, knows the laws. But I think that it can go two ways here. It can either be that, you know, I don't even know how to explain it. First of all, we need to remember that this trial is not for DV. This trial is for defamation. So basically this trial is to show that she defamed Johnny Depp by that Washington Post op-ed. It's not for DV, right? Having said that, if she has these personality disorders, I'm wondering how is it going to go legally. Is the jury going to see her as being an, but she is one because of her disorders, which seem to be consistent with her behavior? Then if the jury really agrees with Johnny, and yes, Johnny wins this trial, and yes, they do agree that she was not because of her personality disorders, but because of just because she was then potentially if this goes to trial and charges are brought and so on and so forth, then it can be argued that she did this because of her personality disorders, because of her traits that she has, because of the disorders. So I mean, it's very complicated, and it's also very confusing, because as much as I want her to be held responsible for her actions, I feel like this personality disorders diagnosis can go both ways, either in favor of Johnny Depp or against Johnny Depp. I don't know. And I think that in my next video on this case, I will talk about Dr. Keeper and how he allegedly helped Amber cover up the incident when she severed Johnny's finger. I need to do more research on this, but it seems that after the incident in Australia, when they were doing the cleanup in the house, someone recorded the entire thing, the entire cleanup. I don't know if it was by accident, if it was done on purpose, but the landline, I believe, was recording the entire cleanup and the conversations of staff in the house, and staff and everybody who was in the house. And in one of those conversations, Dr. Keeper is agreeing with Amber on the cover-up story. In the same recording, Amber is allegedly heard saying that she severed his finger. So again, like I said, I need more info on this. It might be a video, it might not be a video. At this point, really, I am not sure yet. And I am going to say this again. Who in their right mind records everything in their life? Unless guys, they have an ulterior motive. I think that Amber planned this way ahead before she got the divorce. She planned it. That's why she recorded Johnny. Please guys, do let me know what you think about everything that's happening in this case. Let me know down in the comment section below, and also please do let me know if this will go forward in terms of Amber being charged. Do you think that her diagnosis will go against Johnny Depp, or it will go in favor of Johnny Depp? And also, honestly, please guys, tell me, what do you think? Do you think that Johnny Depp is going to win this trial? Me personally, I want to side on the fact that yes, he will win this trial, but then I'm also thinking about the fact that this trial is not about proving that Amber Heard is an... This trial is actually about proving that Johnny Depp suffered financially, emotionally, and everything else after the post that the article was published. So after the Washington Post article was published. So please do let me know what you guys think. Thank you so much for watching today's video. I just want to quickly let you know that on your requests, I finally have a Patreon account. The link will be on your screen right now. Also, it will be in the description down below. You can support the channel on Patreon if you feel like doing it. There are 3 tiers on there. It's going to be 18 plus, including crime scene photos and really more of the things that we can't quite talk about on YouTube for obvious reasons. So yeah, thanks for watching. If you haven't subscribed already, please consider subscribing by hitting the subscribe button, and also make sure you have your notification bells turned on so you are notified of any new videos I upload. Thanks again guys, take care and stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!